Welcome, everybody, back to the Friar Talk podcast and YouTube channel. For today's episode, we're going to be talking about the Padres potentially trading Blake Snell. We'll talk about a couple other starters that we think could potentially get moved, but the main topic will be on Blake Snell. So we look at Blake Snell. He's going to be under contract next year as well. One of the couple pitchers on this staff that will be on the team next year, and it is slated to be under contract. In his time in San Diego last year, started out super rough, really struggled early on. And then in that back end of the season before he was injured, he looked dominant. He was the pitcher of the month, I believe, for August, I want to say it was. Either August or July, one of them. And he balled out at the end of the year. Comes back this year, first start, doesn't get going. Starts out his first start kind of a little bit slow. But his last start was a quality start. He went 6 innings, only allowed 2 hits, and only allowed 2 runs in that start. So quality start there. What do you guys think of about Blake Snell? Do you think it makes sense to move him if you're the Padres? Do you think it's something that they should entertain, something that A.J. Preller should kind of shop him around the league? The rumor was that they would want a massive haul basically to get Blake Snell because he is under contract for another year. And I believe that contract will be $13 million next season. So, Isaac, what do you think about potentially moving Blake Snell?
I don't think it makes much sense. You look at next year and you have Blake Snell and Yu Darvish under contract. I think that's about it. Of course, you got Mackenzie Gore in that third spot. I think Nick Martinez is going to opt out. Joe Musgrove slated for free agency. Sean Manaea slated for free agency. Mike Clevenger slated for free agency. I just don't think it makes sense to trade someone that has another year of control. If you really want to trade him, you can trade him next year maybe, but this year I don't think it makes much sense. And you look at it, he's going to be your number 5, like number 4, number 5 starter, right? You know how many other teams in the league would die to have Blake Snell as a number 4 and number 5 starter? It doesn't make much sense to go from. I think Chase said it in a recent episode. Why would you want to trade your strength? That's your strength. That is essentially your best bet to win a championship this year. You want to win a championship, you got to roll with him coming out of your bullpen, starting games. And Blake Snell's a big game pitcher. Blake Snell's absolutely a big game pitcher. He's exciting to watch. He turns it on when the lights are on him the most. And I think if you're going to a playoff situation, you're probably going to see something like him, Musgrove, Darvish, and maybe Manaea. But essentially, normally you go like 3 starters in the playoffs, 3 or 4 starters. Those will probably be your first 3 guys. You can include Gore, but I think you might see Gore start one playoff game. This is assuming we make it to. Remember, it only takes 85 wins. If you don't expect the Padres to get 85 wins, then I mean, I don't know what to say. I absolutely expect this team to reach 85 wins with the pitching staff they have, assuming they make a move at the deadline for another bat when Fernando comes back. I think this is absolutely an 85-plus win team. But man, I don't know how much sense it makes to trade Blake Snell. Yeah, you might get a king's ransom, but why would you want to trade him away when he looks good this year? He definitely looks good this year. He looked good at the back end of last year. I just think too many people were taking into account his beginning of 2021, where I mean, he was acclimating to a new team, new city, new everything. And when he finally settled down and got rid of that, the trash pitching coach that was Larry Rothschild, everything went smooth. Everything was smooth sailing for him. His changeup looks better this year. Slider still looks good. Solid pitch mix. Absolutely a pitcher I want in our rotation.
100%. Yeah, I did say it was like, why would you trade your strength to try to strengthen one of your weaknesses when you could go about it at the trade? And I mean, you already have guys coming back. You have Tatis. You have other options to exhaust before you try to trade Blake Snell to address the weakness in the outfield. I mean, we have Mazara coming up. Brooker just got called up because Myers went to the IL. But I mean, like Isaac was saying, Snell is a big game pitcher. Every time Snell come out during a big game, it's been a career game for him. We saw the World Series Game 6 where the Rays pulled him early, which they don't pull him there. They probably go to Game 7, possibly win it. He was phenomenal after Larry Rothschild left. His first game back is understandable with, being inconsistent. It's his first game back. He was working back from an injury. But he's been looking good. He's been looking a lot better. I know a lot of people have complaints about him throwing a lot of pitches, which he does. I mean, we saw it last year. He kind of can be very inefficient sometimes at putting people away. But when he gets efficient or when he is efficient, he is just one of the best pitchers in the MLB. And you can't just give up on that. Just go, oh, we need a king's ransom. We don't really. We have a lot of positions tied down. We got a lot of free agency in the rotation next year. Like Isaac said, Nick Martinez is probably going to opt out if he continues to have the year he has. He's going to want his money. He's going to want to make more money than this. And right now, he really doesn't have a role on the Padres outside of being a bullpen. And if he wants to be a starter, he's probably going to have to go somewhere else. So as it stands, you'd lose 4 players. You'd lose Musgrove, Minaya, Clev, and Martinez, and that would leave you Snell, Darvish, and Gore. And would both hit free agency after next year. So that leaves Gore. And I mentioned it in the live stream. When you look at your pitching rotation in the minor leagues, it's not really good. You don't have a lot of depth. I mean, you can address it in this draft, but that means they're still going to be a couple years away. Pedro Avila has near a 6 ERA. Ryan Weathers looks lost in AAA. He has, I think, a 7 ERA, if not higher. Gasser struggling a little bit. I don't know if Kevin Kopps is going to be able to start in the MLB. He looks like he's going to be a reliever. Jackson Wolf looks like the only decent starter as of right now, only the one having a decent year with the 3.77 ERA. I'm forgetting another guy, but he was struggling too down in AA. The only other great pitcher that we can think of is Moises Lugo. He's only made 1 start, and that was 3 innings. He's looking more and more like a reliever. Reggie Lawson doesn't look that great. I mean, you look around, there's not a lot of options. And the minor leagues to come immediately up and make an impact like Gore has, you don't have it. Unfortunately, you don't. And you're going to have to spend money on either extending Musgrove or trying to figure out a combination between Musgrove, Minaya, and Clev. You have to at least bring 2 of those guys back for a few years. You're going to run into the problem of you're going to hit Tatis's contract extension where it's going to bump up in price. You're going to be paying Machado 30. You're going to be paying Tatis $30 million a year. You're going to have to figure out the outfield situation. You're losing Myers. Grisham looks lost. And Profar might opt out, might not. You're going to be on the books for him for another $9 million, I think. So when you look at it and you look at the whole situation of the Padres, it makes absolutely 0 sense to trade Blake Snell. You need him for at least the next year because you're losing guys this year, this offseason, and you don't have any way to replace that talent through your farm system right now. You absolutely keep Blake Snell, and you keep that strength that you have. This rotation is the reason we are winning baseball games. We lost yesterday, unfortunately, because the bullpen. But being anywhere near the position of winning if it wasn't for our rotation. You don't give up on that strength.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think you guys can hear the drums outside, so sorry if that's in the background. But looking at Blake Snell, I think that the argument could be made that if you do trade him away, you do free up that money and you could go spend that on starting pitching. However, you guys already brought up Tatis's contract is climbing. Each year it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's getting a lot harder to re-sign. I don't think it's very likely that you get to keep Minaya and Musgrove. I think that is really, really, really unlikely. So you're kind of looking at, you hope you get Musgrove. You hope you bring one or 2 of these guys back. You guys mentioned Nick Martinez contract. So he's slated to make $6.5 million next year. However, there's a $1.5 million buyout. So if he can make more than $5 million on the open market, it is likely that he will leave. Now, keep in mind, there's multiple years to that deal, so they'd have to match it. But I don't know. I mean, that's $5 million a year for a guy right now that has been starting and has, for the most part, he's been starting, and he has a sub-4 ERA. And he hasn't pitched in the league in a long time. This is his first year back. Like, there was a little adjustment period. He's not the best, but as a back-end starter, you could see a team paying him quite a bit more money than $5 million a year. So it is likely that he will be gone. And I think that's why it makes the most sense to hang on to Blake Snell. It would be very scary if you moved him and you didn't address another starter. You didn't have anyone. And then next year you were going into next season with Darvish and Gore as your starters. 2 guys. And yes, of course, they're going to go and they're going to get other guys to fill those spots, but it can be a significant drop off from what they have right now. They have a bunch of money to spend, but they don't have a bunch of money to spend for many years. That's the problem. A lot of this money is going to, and there are other deals. There is the Hosmer deal. It drops down and then it disappears in 3 years, but there's a lot of money tied up to a bunch of players. And over the next couple of years, you're going to see a lot of that free up, but then Fernando's contract is climbing as well. So it makes it tough to see the future of this team and the future of this pitching staff specifically. But trading Blake Snell, all that does is it brings a lot of uncertainty there. You don't know what that's going to look like. So I think it makes sense to keep him. For this year's team, I think it makes sense to keep him. If you are going to trade a starter, we just brought up Nick Martinez is likely to opt out. Trade Nick Martinez. If you're going to trade someone, and of course, you're not going to be able to get the haul that you will for Blake Snell, but what really kind of haul are you going to get? Because the only teams that would want Blake Snell would be a contender, right? Like the only teams want him. Why would they trade a good piece away to us if we're a contender? It doesn't really make much sense. So I think that the Padres are not going to get an offer good enough for him. You could see a different team that wants to bring in Martinez as in the back end, and we end up getting a piece, but like a lesser piece. I think that makes more sense. I think not trying to go after and get a king's ransom for Blake Snell because, frankly, no one's going to pay it. And it just doesn't really make much sense. It doesn't really add up to the Padres' future. The only case I can see is if you trade Blake Snell now, the next year you have the $13 million to spend. And $13 million is quite a bit for a starter, but likelihood you're probably going to have to try to spend it on someone. You're going to have to spend a lot more money to try to get someone like Blake Snell's caliber. And that's where it gets tough. And also, a lot of starting pitchers on the open market have injury history or a lot of uncertainty for how much longer they're going to be able to go. So we didn't see the whole end of it, but James Shields, for instance, Padres bring in James Shields, right? He comes in and he's completely washed almost immediately. And you realize right away, why did they sign this guy? He's not the same guy that he was. That happens so much with the pitching market. So it is really scary when you have a bunch of money tied up to these guys. But I don't really think it makes much sense to trade away the current strength and then trade a guy away where you have this massive question mark becoming even more massive in terms of the future of the rotation. So it's also a no from me. However, I do see the one case you can make that you would be able to go and try to get someone else. If that's something you think, comment some names because I'd love to hear guys that people have in mind. But Chase, Isaac, anything else you guys want to add?
Yeah, James Shields is one of my favorite Padres of all time. He's done so much for this organization. He's essentially the main reason we're contending right now, and not for the reason you may think. You look at Blake Snell and you think, man, this team is basically in contention because of guys like Blake Snell, because of guys like Jake Cronenworth. Those are, I think, the two main guys that everyone's talking about trading, but those are also the two of the main guys why you're in contention right now, because they have a lot of talent. They bring you a lot of upside. They're consistent. And I know Jake Cronenworth's slumping, but man, just stay patient. It's going to come around. I promise. But yeah, man, I don't know. Trading Blake Snell doesn't make much sense. Like you said, what is a king's ransom for the Padres? A lot of prospects. And their prospect, the farm's been a little depleted, I guess you can say. It's not a very deep farm system, but when there's going to be a couple guys that come up 2024, 2025, when those guys start aging and, developing, there'll be some good prospects. The Padres always have a decent farm system. So I'm pretty confident that it'll be replenished here soon. Other than that, I don't think the odds of you getting an outfielder out of Blake Snell are very high, especially from a contending team. Like Matt said, why would they want to trade away any of their pieces? But yeah, that's all I really have on Blake Snell. I love watching Blake Snell. I really don't want to see him gone. I think he's an amazing person to have on your team. I think he's a great teammate. Always super fun I always see him having fun on the bench or whatever it is that he's doing. And I don't want to see him in another uniform up until he's gone, really, in a year and a half, I think.
Anything else to add, Chase? You're cutting out a little bit. All right. We're all good. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening, guys. Hopefully, don't get another meltdown later on in this series. A really fun pitching matchup. If you are watching this before the Joe Musgrove-Corbin Burns Day starts, hopefully the dude balls out today. I think this is probably one of the best pitching matchups that we'll see all season from the Padres' point of view. So real exciting stuff tonight. But I think it's going to do it for today's episode. So thank you all for listening, and we'll be back tomorrow talking about how horrible the MLB baseballs have become, and really just talking about how that's affected the game. So it'll be a pretty fun one, pretty entertaining one. But I think it's going to do it for today's episode. So thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you guys tomorrow.